Hello everyone. Today we will begin a journey into the dark heart of the Mayan jungle, where history bleeds into legend, and something ancient waits to claim the unwary. Imagine you are standing now, not in the comfort of your room, but under a suffocating canopy of prehistoric trees. The air here is not just humid, it's heavy. It feels like the breath of a sleeping beast, warm and moist, wrapping around you like a shroud woven from thick vines and damp moss. You can hear the constant, insectile chorus, a million tiny legs and wings, creating a static hum that vibrates in your inner ear. It is a sound that slowly erodes your sense of safety. Before we begin, I hope you can take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell if my video brings you something truly interesting. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what is the local time? Right now, I love seeing how far apart we all are, sharing this same slow, chilling moment. And now, let's begin this journey together. You find yourself in a quiet, poorly lit corner of an antique store, the kind of place where dust is a permanent resident and time seems to move backward. That's where you first laid eyes on it, a crumpled, brittle piece of parchment, not paper, but something closer to dried, stretched leather. It was tucked into a leather-bound, mildewed copy of a Spanish colonial journal. Marked simply as unclassified acquisition, you didn't choose it. It simply called to you, whispering of forgotten secrets with a scent of dried earth and pure sulfur. When you touch it, the smell is almost overwhelming, a mineral sharpness mixed with the faint, unsettling aroma of decay, like the memory of a lightning strike on wet stone. This document, this unsettling map, is drawn not with ink, but with a dark, reddish pigment that flakes slightly under your fingertip. It isn't a map of roads or cities, no. This is a map of descent. The lines are erratic, almost feverish, focusing on a single, impossible landmark deep in the unmapped sections of the Yucatan, a swirling snakehead, its tongue forked and pointing downward. Beneath it, a series of glyphs that defy translation, but your gut screams one word: cult. The map details are unnervingly specific considering its age. It shows 3 distinct concentric rings leading to a central point, labeled with a stylized serpent biting its own tail, a twisted Ouroboros. As you trace the lines with your finger, the parchment feels strangely warm in one spot. A sudden flush of heat against your skin, and you pull your hand back. A moment of true horror creeps in when you realize one of the drawn symbols looks exactly like the faded scar on your own left wrist. A small, unremarkable mark you've had since childhood. Is this coincidence? You try to laugh it off, a nervous, dry sound in your throat. But the silence of the shop seems to swallow it whole. This small, strange detail is the first of many inexplicable occurrences. You decide to follow the map, compelled by a curiosity that borders on obsession. The coordinates rough, fragmented, but just enough led you to the edge of an emerald hell. The deep, unforgiving jungle bordering Guatemala and Mexico. You feel the forest pressing in on you immediately. It's not welcoming, it's enduring. Remember how you felt the first time you stood at the edge of a deep forest at night? The trees too tall, too dark? This is worse. This is the weight of an entire forgotten civilization watching you. The air around you seems to be constantly shifting, not from wind, but from some subtle, unseen movement. You hear a true horror story echo in your mind, The disappearance of a group of logging workers back in the 1950s who ventured into this very sector. They were not found missing items or a struggle. Instead, their campsite was discovered intact, their food half-eaten, their equipment neatly stacked, but the men themselves had simply vanished. They left behind only a single strange thing, a perfectly preserved, coiled serpent skin, impossibly large, draped over the tent pole. You try to rationalize it: jungle, wild animals, easy to get lost, but the image of the neat camp and the giant, silent skin stays with you. Now, you take your first slow step off the worn path, the jungle swallowing the light almost instantly, the map crinkles in your hand. You realize the paper isn't just old, it's resistant. It has survived centuries in humidity and neglect. This map, you understand, is not just a guide, it is an invitation. An invitation extended across 5 centuries, reaching out specifically to you. You feel a deep, slow chill run down your spine. The kind that doesn't come from cold air, but from the sudden, profound understanding that you are where you are supposed to be. And that is perhaps the most terrifying thought of all. The world outside the jungle ceases to exist the moment you take your second, third, and subsequent steps. You are no longer moving through a landscape. You are being swallowed by an enormous, living throat. The air, already heavy in part 1, now feels viscous, clinging to your clothes and skin. Every breath is a struggle against the humidity, a slow, hot gasp that tastes of wet leaves and minerals. The light is reduced to a sickly, green-tinged twilight, filtered through layers of canopy so thick they feel like the roof of an underground cavern. You must rely on the fragile, brittle parchment map, which seems to glow faintly in the gloom, demanding your attention. The trek is immediately treacherous. Your boots sink into slick, dark mud that pulls at your ankles with unsettling force, as if the earth itself does not want you to pass. You keep your eyes fixed on the map's cryptic lines, realizing the cartography is not based on geology, but on feeling. The drawing points toward low-lying, swampy areas, the very places a rational person would avoid. Why? Perhaps the Serpent King prefers to dwell where the earth is soft and yielding, a perfect place for something to sink and be forgotten. It is here, in the oppressive silence broken only by the buzz of colossal insects, that you begin to hear the whistles. They are not bird calls, they are too uniform, too perfectly pitched to be natural. Whistle, a pause. Whistle, another pause. It sounds almost mechanical, like a repeating clockwork toy winding down, but echoing from deep within the unseen walls of the jungle. It is always behind you, always just out of sight. You stop, your heart thudding a wet rhythm against your ribs, and turn. Staring into the dense wall of green, nothing, only the shadows and the endless vibrating hum of the insects. The local legends you vaguely recall, stories exchanged with hushed voices in the border towns, speak of the forest watchers. Not spirits, not demons, but the restless, unjustly wronged dead who guard the secrets of the forest by mimicking human sounds. Their purpose, the story goes, is not to attack, but to lure. They whistle, repeating the same maddening 3-note phrase until the listener, driven mad by the repetition, walks straight toward the sound, deeper and deeper into the unmarked territory until the jungle closes over them forever. Whistle. You take a step forward, away from the sound, and the whistle shifts location instantly. Now, slightly to your right, you smile weakly to yourself, trying to break the growing tension. If you think this humidity is bad, wait till you find out what the bugs here eat for breakfast. You whisper to the camera, a little joke that falls flat in the overwhelming silence. But the distraction is necessary. The whistles are a chilling thorn in your side, an unwelcome companion on this dark path. Your progress is painstakingly slow. You remember the case of Colonel Fitzwilliam, a British explorer in the 19th century who attempted to map the uncharted regions of the Bedtime Basin. His last journal entry, discovered years later, detailed not a hostile native encounter, but a descent into absolute mental chaos. He wrote, in a shaky hand, of a sound, a relentless, piping melody that he believed was played by creatures beneath the earth. That is the true horror event that haunts this part of the world. Fitzwilliam's remains were found at the foot of an unremarkable hill, his eyes open and staring upward, but his final entry contained the most disturbing detail. He had meticulously stacked every single one of his teeth into a small, perfect pyramid beside his head. No one knows why he did this. Was it an offering? An attempt to silence the sound? An incomprehensible academic debate still rages. Was this act a final, frantic ritual of a broken mind? Or was it a specific, forgotten gesture linked to an ancient, pre-Columbian belief system? A tribute to a god who demanded the hard, white core of human life. You instinctively clamp your jaws shut, touching your own teeth with the tip of your tongue. Whistle, it sounds closer this time, almost like it's mocking your sudden silent fear. The map suddenly demands your attention. It shows a tight, nearly vertical line drawn in that strange red pigment. And as you look up, you see it, a massive, root-clotted rise of earth that you must now climb. As you begin to haul yourself upward, grabbing at knotted vines and rough tree bark, the elevation brings a small, momentary relief from the swampy floor. You reach a small, natural ledge, and for the first time in hours, you see a landmark that doesn't belong to the jungle. It is only a fraction of a thing, glimpsed through a veil of moss and spiderwebs, a dark, perfectly square piece of stone, clearly cut and placed by human hands. It is unnerving in its artificiality, a cold, silent sign of ancient engineering amidst the natural chaos. It confirms the map's impossible promise, civilization, or something like it is here. But the closer you get, the more unsettling the observation becomes. The square stone is not part of a wall or a floor. It is simply standing upright, planted deep in the earth, like a dark, forgotten tooth. And from a small, almost invisible fissure in the center of that stone, a faint, metallic chink sound emerges, completely out of sync with the rhythmic whistling. It is a strange, mysterious detail that sends a fresh wave of coldness over you. You pull yourself onto the ledge, catching your breath, the air slightly cooler here. You know what lies below the swamp, the darkness, and the relentless, maddening whistle. You have passed the first living barrier. But the sight of that single, square, impossibly silent stone is more chilling than any jungle sound. It marks the boundary, the transition from the world of nature to the world of the Serpent King You stand before the strange, silent monolith, that square piece of cut stone, catching your breath, the humidity momentarily lessened by the slight elevation. The metallic chink sound you heard earlier has stopped, replaced by an unnerving, absolute silence. You carefully brush away the thick layers of moss and clinging jungle growth around the stone's base, and that's when you see it a seam, not a natural crack, but a vertical line, expertly hidden, suggesting the square stone is not a marker but a door. This discovery sends a fresh surge of adrenaline through you, cold and sharp, pushing back against the exhaustion of the jungle trek. Your hands, slightly trembling, trace the lines on the brittle parchment map once more. The serpentine head, the stylized Ouroboros, it all seems to align with this spot. You notice a small, almost invisible depression on the stone face, carved in the shape of a single, unblinking eye. You press it, gently at first, then with increasing force. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happens. You hear only the frantic, anxious drumming of your own heartbeat. Then, a grinding sound, slow, deep, and resonant, begins beneath your feet. It's not the sound of stone scraping stone, but something heavier, something geological, as if the earth itself is sighing. The square stone monolith begins to sink inward, then slides slowly to the right, revealing a gaping black aperture. The first thing that hits you from the darkness is the smell, not jungle rot or sulfur, but the dry, sharp scent of dust that has not seen the sun in centuries, mingled with a faint, cloying sweetness. It's the smell of history perfectly preserved, yet profoundly unnatural. You peer into the opening. The stone archway is massive, expertly crafted, and completely covered in carvings, a dense tapestry of unsettling art. This is the entrance unsealed. The meticulously carved bas-reliefs immediately seize your attention. They are not the usual heroic figures or astronomical charts you expect from classic Mayan ruins. These carvings are dedicated entirely to snakes and humans. Massive, coiled serpents with fanged, almost human-like faces dominate every section. They are shown not only devouring but embracing human figures, a chilling duality that suggests worship and consumption are one and the same. You trace one specific figure, with your eyes a human offering, standing rigidly, adorned with plumes and jade, but with an expression not of fear, but of ecstatic, terrifying acceptance. As the serpent's mouth descends, a strange, mysterious detail catches your eye. A small aberration among the grand, horrifying spectacle. Near the base of the archway, where the carving is low enough to touch, a single, tiny lizard, clearly modern and alive, scurries across the stone, its scales a bright, vibrant green. But as it crosses one specific carved glyph, a circle with 3 downward pointing lines, the lizard suddenly freezes. Its color instantly drains to a ghostly white, and it falls, stiff and dead, onto the mossy ground. You stare at the tiny corpse, perplexed and deeply chilled. Did the stone kill it? Was that glyph a warning? You decide a little dark humor is required right now, just to keep the paralyzing fear at bay. Well, that's what happens when you skip out on your HOA fees, you murmur, trying to sound nonchalant as you shine your flashlight into the suffocating darkness ahead. The true horror event that these carvings evoke is the historical account of the ritual of the Great Binding. While most Mayan sacrifices focused on bloodletting or heart extraction, the Serpent King cult, according to scarce Spanish accounts, had a far more psychologically devastating rite. Instead of immediate death, the victims were bound in the coiling embrace of giant, non-venomous snakes, perhaps pythons or anacondas, for days within these underground chambers. They weren't killed by venom or a knife. They were slowly crushed or died of terror and dehydration. Their last moments spent in the relentless, cold pressure of the cult's totem animal. The cult members believed this agonizing, slow death granted the dying person a powerful, terrifying vision that transferred the victim's life essence directly to the Serpent King. As you stand there, looking into the pitch blackness of the unsealed doorway, you can almost hear the soft, ragged breathing of a victim, the slow, agonizing squeeze of a massive muscle around bone. You take a deep, slow breath, steadying yourself. You notice that the air inside the opening, while musty, is completely still, not a hint of a breeze. This is an environment sealed off from the living world, a pocket of dead air held captive for hundreds of years. You switch on your headlamp, the beam weak against the ancient, light-swallowing darkness, and take the first step across the threshold. Your boot lands on smooth, cold stone, a clean contrast to the muddy jungle floor. You have passed through the wall of the world. The massive stone slab begins to grind back into place behind you, slowly, relentlessly, pushing you forward. The sound is deafening, and you instinctively throw your shoulder against the moving stone. But it's immovable. The last sliver of natural light vanishes. The air immediately drops in temperature, a startling chill after the jungle's heat. You are now entirely alone, in the silence of the sealed tomb, left only with the grotesque carvings, the inexplicable death of the lizard, and the chilling promise of the Serpent King. The door, heavy with centuries of silence, clicks shut behind you with a chilling, final sound. Not a crash, but a soft, mechanical thud that seals you into the darkness. You are now truly underground, where the whispers of the jungle cannot reach you. The air you breathe is dry and cool, almost sterile, yet carries that faint, persistent sweetness, like decaying flowers or forgotten incense. The transition is jarring from the chaotic heat of the living forest to the regulated, cold silence of a tomb. Your headlamp cuts a narrow, defiant tunnel through the oppressive blackness, revealing a smooth, polished corridor descending at a gentle, unwavering slope. You begin your slow, careful descent into the ruins. The walls here are not adorned with the terrifying, ecstatic sacrifice scenes of the entrance, but with repetitive geometric patterns. As you walk, the light catches the stone, and you notice a disturbing shimmer. The walls are slightly wet, slicked with a thin, almost oily film of moisture. You reach out and touch it. It's cold and unnervingly smooth, leaving a faint mineral residue on your fingertips. Every step you take echoes loudly in the corridor, at a crisp sound that seems to travel too far, too fast, amplifying your sense of isolation. You start to walk on your toes, trying to soften the noise. But the silence demands volume. You tell yourself, with a nervous laugh, if I trip and fall down here, I'm going to spend the next 3 parts complaining about the acoustics. But the joke doesn't work. The fear is deeper now. Rooted in the stone beneath your feet, you soon arrive in a small, square room, an abrupt break in the descent. The floor and walls here are made of a different material, a dense, dark volcanic rock, absorbing your headlamp's light greedily. In the center sits a perfect, polished cube of obsidian. It's about 2 feet high, completely smooth, and utterly flawless. This is the obsidian altar room, and its purpose sparks an immediate, compelling academic debate. Why is this room here? It's too small for a grand ritual, too far from the entrance for a welcoming antechamber. Most Mayan scholars, focusing on public religious practice, would argue this obsidian cube was purely ceremonial, perhaps a pedestal for a precious statue or an incense burner. But a minority, those fringe archaeologists who delve into the forbidden texts and the cult history, suggest something darker and more personal. They argue that the altar was used for private, almost meditative sacrifices. Obsidian, the sacred volcanic glass, was used to create the sharpest blades known in the ancient world. They theorize that this altar was not for public human sacrifice, but for the self-sacrifice of the Serpent King's initiates, a place where they would meticulously and excruciatingly cut non-lethal, yet deeply painful, wounds into themselves, dedicating their blood and suffering to the cult. The smooth, cold surface of the obsidian, perfectly preserved, seems to wait for the next offering. You remember the red pigment on the map. Was it simple ink or a dried, ancient blood paint used by an initiate? As you circle the obsidian block, you notice a strange, mysterious detail. Carved into the ceiling directly above the altar is a complex, spiderweb-like pattern of lines, all converging on a single point directly above the center of the cube. But one line, thinner and shallower than the rest, is deliberately scored out, violently erased from the millennia-old carving. What idea? What concept was so terrifying or so wrong that the cult felt compelled to expunge it from the very stone above their holiest site? You shiver, wondering if the removal of that line fundamentally broke something, and if that something is now awake. This room is the source of a recent true horror event that the local authorities still try to suppress. Just 5 years ago, a lone spelunker ventured into a newly discovered cavern system miles away from here, but which shared the exact same geometric construction style. He was rescued 3 days later, alive but completely catatonic. The only evidence of his ordeal was found on his chest, carved into his skin with surgical precision. Was the exact same spiderweb pattern you see on the ceiling above you, save for the single, intentionally erased line. He had, it appeared, replicated the pattern perfectly on himself, but deliberately refused to score out the final forbidden line. He died 2 days later, still silent, the wounds superficial but his spirit completely gone. Standing there, beside the silent, dark altar, you feel the weight of centuries of self-inflicted pain and erased knowledge. You touch the ceiling gently, where the removed line should be, and your fingers come away dry. but faintly smelling of that inexplicable, sterile sweetness. You realize you must move on. The slow, insistent pull of the descent is calling you forward. You take a final look at the obsidian altar, its surface so black it seems to absorb all light and sound. And you continue down the gently sloping corridor. You feel the whispering walls surrounding you, not with sound, but with pressure, with the cold, absolute knowledge that you are traversing a path specifically designed to break the unprepared, a path leading you not to a ruin, but to a vast underground truth. The sloping corridor ends abruptly, opening into a vast, unsettling space. Your headlamp struggles to illuminate the high ceiling, which seems to disappear into the gloom above, suggesting this chamber is built beneath a significant natural or artificial dome. The air here is colder than the previous section, the silence deeper, as if this room actively repels sound. You take a step forward, and the stone floor is unexpectedly smooth, polished by centuries of passage, yet covered in a fine, unsettling dust that swirls up momentarily around your boots. As your eyes adjust, using the limited light you have, you realize the shape of the room is roughly circular, and its purpose is immediately clear, generating a moment of profound, chilling dread. You have discovered the main subterranean resting place of the cult's followers, the site of a true horror event preserved in its entirety. Arrayed in a perfect, unbroken circle around the perimeter of the chamber are figures, not statues, but the remains of people, at least 20 of them, all meticulously placed, eternally seated. These are the mummified figures, desiccated by the cave's stable, dry environment, and the mineral properties of the surrounding stone. They are sitting upright, their knees drawn to their chests, their arms wrapped around their shins, a pose of extreme, rigid repose. They are dressed in what must have been ceremonial robes, now reduced to brittle, dark fibers clinging to their skeletal forms. The terror doesn't come from the decay, but from the unsettling order. This isn't a hasty burial. It is a meticulously arranged waiting room for the dead. You walk slowly along the perimeter, your light lingering on their silent, hollowed faces. Their mouths are open, perpetually fixed in a silent, final gasp. Then you notice the strange, mysterious detail that elevates this scene from mere history to profound cult terror. In the mouth of every single figure, carefully placed upon the tongue or tucked between the teeth, is a small, tarnished copper coin. The coins are identical, roughly hammered, and bear the unmistakable symbol of the serpentine Ouroboros, the serpent eating its tail from the map you hold. Why the coins? The familiar European myth speaks of paying the ferryman in the underworld. But this is a pre-Columbian Mayan cult. The coin here doesn't represent passage. It represents possession. Perhaps it was the final, non-negotiable proof of their oath to the Serpent King, a token ensuring that their very essence, their final words, their soul, belonged solely to the cult. And what if the open mouths aren't a gasp of death, but an act of holding, preserving the coin until the Serpent King demands his due? You involuntarily run your tongue over your own teeth, feeling the hard, dry surfaces of your mouth. You can't help but attempt a piece of dark levity to cut through the mounting tension. Well, I guess even immortal snake cults have a toll booth. Good thing I packed light, you whisper, the sound immediately swallowed by the silent room. As you move deeper into the room, You encounter the focus of a long-standing, incomprehensible academic debate. It concerns the positioning of the bodies. While all are seated in that rigid, knees-to-chest position, 4 of the figures, one at each cardinal point, are slightly different. They face away from the center of the room, looking toward the dark, unyielding wall. No one knows why. Were they guards? Were they failures? Was this an immense punishment for those who doubted the Serpent King at the very moment of their dedication? Some scholars argue that these 4 were designated watchers, tasked with guarding the cult's knowledge from the outside world, even in death. Others posit a more chilling theory. They represent the 4 directions the Serpent King must travel to complete his final cycle, and their backward position indicates a refusal to join the final ceremony, a final act of unjust defiance that warranted perpetual cold exclusion. The debate remains unsolved, a terrifying ambiguity hanging in the cold air. You move to the center of the circle. Here, the floor is marked by another set of mysterious carvings, not snakes, but a repeating pattern of concentric rings that seem to draw the eye downward. You remember the whispers of the immortal scales promised to the initiates in the cult's darker lore. This room feels like the promise fulfilled. They are simply waiting, their souls perhaps already absorbed by the cold, slow-moving entity below. You turn your headlamp toward a break in the wall, directly across from where you entered. It is a low, unassuming archway, barely taller than you, leading into a darkness even denser than the chamber you are in. It is an opening that promises not relief, but the true, winding path forward, a labyrinth. You take a final, lingering look at the silent, mummified congregation, their mouths agape, their copper coins gleaming faintly in your lamp beam, a silent testament to their chilling, dedicated end. You feel an immense pressure to not disturb them, to leave their eternal waiting untouched. But the pull of the passage is stronger than your fear. You leave the chilling, silent congregation of the seated dead, stepping through the low archway into an absolute, suffocating darkness. This is the labyrinth. The path immediately narrows and begins to twist violently, a stark contrast to the straight, descending corridor and the open chamber of Part 5. You are now truly beneath the earth, navigating a suffocating man-made burrow. The walls here are rough-hewn stone, close enough on either side that you can feel the cold, damp texture as you pass. The silence of the previous room is replaced by an unnerving echo chamber. Every scuff of your boot, every scrape of your bag against the rock, seems to be amplified, sent spiraling off into the unseen turns ahead. You stop for a moment, listening intently. You hear your own rapid, shallow breath. And for a terrifying second, you think you hear a soft, wet, slithering sound just around the bend. You tell yourself, it's just the sound of the condensation dripping, amplified by the stone. You try to laugh, a strained, thin sound. I told myself I packed light, but I didn't realize I also packed a sound engineer with a massive bass boost. The air is getting thicker. It's not just humid, it has a subtle, earthy sweetness, the same one from the entrance, but much stronger now, almost cloying. It feels narcotic, heavy on your lungs, making your thoughts feel slow and sluggish. This atmosphere itself is a true horror event. The air quality in many deep, ancient Mayan chambers has been scientifically linked to the burning of psychotropic incense during long rituals, designed to induce hallucinations. trance states, or total collapse in initiates and victims alike. You realize that simply breathing down here is an act of chemical submission to the ancient cult. You push forward, using your hands to brace yourself against the cold stone, navigating the perpetual turns. You feel completely lost in a maze of darkened tunnels. Your sense of direction is useless. You are relying entirely on the map, which seems to shimmer faintly, its impossible lines somehow making sense in this three-dimensional, disorienting space. You remember the 4 watchers in the previous room, facing the wall. Were they placed there to eternally remind the living of the fate of those who tried to use their own senses, their own navigation? Instead of surrendering to the Serpent King's path, you reach a particularly tight section where the tunnel dips down sharply, forcing you to crouch low. As your light scans the floor, you see a small, chilling detail that makes you freeze entirely. Lying neatly on a slightly raised, smooth section of stone is an offering. Not an ancient skeleton or a jade mask, but a chilling, fresh offering of tropical fruit, a small, perfectly ripe mango, a cluster of yellow plantains, and a red passion fruit, their skins still glossy with moisture. They look as though they were picked this morning. This is the strange, mysterious detail that shatters the sense of safe antiquity. Something is clearly alive, or recently active, down here. The cult is not merely history, it is present. You reach out a trembling hand, debating whether to touch the fruit. Why leave an offering here? Is it meant for the jungle's denizens who stray too far? Or is it meant for you? A welcoming provision left by someone who knows you are here. Following the old path, you decide not to touch it. It sits there, a small, vibrant splash of life in the encompassing cold stone. An ultimate betrayal of the concept of an abandoned ruin. You realize that you are not exploring an empty tomb. You are walking into a home. To shake the profound unease, you allow yourself a momentary, dark thought. If they have fresh fruit, maybe they also have fresh coffee. I could really use a latte right now. This whole trapped in a cult maze thing is tiring. But the image of the fruit is too disturbing, too contemporary, to fully dispel the fear. The map suddenly forces a decision. You are at a junction of 3 near identical tunnels, each one spiraling away into the blackness. The lines on the parchment converge slightly, pointing toward the central, narrowest tunnel, which seems to have a faint, almost invisible vapor rising from it. You can hear the relentless, low drip, drip, drip of water echoing from that chosen path. You gather your courage, adjust the straps of your pack, and slowly, deliberately, turn your back on the tunnels that might lead to an exit, choosing instead the deepest, most suffocating path toward the heart of the Serpent King's lair. You remind yourself of the copper coins in the mouths of the dead. The Serpent King demands commitment, and you are terrifyingly fully committed now. You proceed into the narrow, vapor-filled tunnel, your senses already dulled by the heavy, narcotic atmosphere of the labyrinth. The humidity here is extreme, clinging to you like a second skin, but it's mixed with a new, distinct component, a deep, pervasive scent of incense. It's thick, sweet, and complex, containing notes of sandalwood, dried jungle flowers, and something burnt, something organic and profoundly unsettling. Perhaps bone or certain resins unique to this dark place. This powerful aroma acts as a sensory beacon, drawing you forward. The tunnel widens slightly, and the walls become smoother once more, leading you into a larger, elongated chamber. You realize the smell isn't just lingering, it is fresh, suggesting an ongoing, or at least very recent, ritual use. As you step fully into the chamber, your headlamp reveals the walls are not carved, but covered in a massive, ancient mural, preserved perfectly by the stable underground environment. The mural depicts a dense genealogical history, a visual record of the lineage of the Serpent King cult. It's painted in the same deep reddish pigment you saw on the map, now understood to be an ancient sacred color, perhaps derived from cinnabar or even blood paint. The mural focuses on a succession of high priests and priestesses, each figure adorned with increasingly elaborate snake regalia, their faces hidden behind masks crafted to resemble the Serpent King. The frightening detail is the transmission of power in every scene. The dying leader is shown transferring a small, glowing orb, the serpent's eye, into the mouth of the successor, a chilling image of consuming one's predecessor to gain their power. A strange, mysterious detail stands out. Scattered among the portraits of the human leaders are much older, smaller renderings of animals, not just snakes, but jaguars, bats, and crocodiles. However, beneath each of these animal figures, there is a tiny, delicate carving of a human hand, the palm open, offering something small and indistinct. These aren't the primary cult objects. They appear to be offerings to the animal itself, suggesting a far older, multi-deity worship that the Serpent King cult violently absorbed or suppressed. You pause, wondering if the older, forgotten gods of the jungle are still down here, trapped beneath the weight of the serpent's dominion. The sheer scale and preservation of the mural evoke a true horror event that remains one of archaeology's most profound and chilling mysteries. The fate of the entire royal court of the classic period city of Calakmul in the 7th century. They didn't fall to invaders or famine. The court, led by a charismatic high priest who had reportedly declared himself the scales of the sky, simply disappeared overnight. Their temple was sealed from the inside, and when it was opened centuries later, it was empty, save for a single, enormous serpent skeleton that covered the entire floor. No human remains were ever found. This mural, detailing the consuming lineage, offers a visceral, terrifying explanation for such historical voids that the cult's power was not just spiritual but literal, absorbing its followers' body and soul. The thought is heavy, and you rub the back of your neck, feeling the sudden cold prickle of deep fear. You decide on a quick, nervous joke. Well, if you're looking for family trees, this one is certainly the most dramatic, but I'd skip the annual reunion. As you follow the mural to its end, you notice the final figure, the last priestess, is depicted not with the glowing orb being passed to her, but with the orb being held by a shadowy, impossibly tall figure lurking behind her. This shadowy figure is crowned by a colossal, featureless serpent head. The transition is clear. The human line of leadership has ended, replaced by the direct, terrifying reign of the Serpent King itself. The end of the mural leads directly to a sharp corner. You turn it slowly, your headlamp beam trembling. You are now at the center of the structure, or at least a major node. The sound of the drumbeat, a rhythmic sound hinted at in the deeper parts of the cult's lore, is still absent. But the silence here is so absolute that you feel the potential for sound vibrating in the air as you move away from the mural. You realize the walls themselves are whispering to you, not with sound, but with the intense, oppressive weight of their history and the sweet, dizzying scent of the incense. You are closer now than ever, following the scent like a helpless moth to a terrible, ancient flame. You know that whatever lies next will be the true confrontation with the being that orchestrated this entire terrifying descent. Terrifying. The intoxicating scent of incense leads you around the sharp corner, and the geometry of the tunnels immediately changes again. You are now in a high, narrow, almost cylindrical space, a shaft that seems to pierce the structure vertically. The air here is drier, and the scent of the incense is so concentrated it makes your eyes water slightly. You feel a dizzying lightheadedness, a creeping numbness that makes you feel strangely unconcerned about your predicament. This atmosphere is deliberately cultivated, designed to prepare the mind for profound, terrifying revelation. At the far end of this shaft, sitting on a low, unadorned pedestal of gray stone, you see it. It is the focal point of this section. An object so dense with history and malignant presence that it seems to absorb the very light from your lamp. This is the ancient ceremonial mask, the Serpent's Eye. It is crafted from a dark, polished wood, perhaps mahogany or ironwood, and intricately carved into a stylized, snarling serpent's face. The mask is not large, it is perfectly sized to fit a human head, but its sheer weight of atmosphere is colossal. It's adorned with small, chipped flakes of gold and jade teeth, glinting dimly in your light. The terrifying power of the mask, however, is not in its artistry but in its gaze. The eyes of the mask, Ishiko, are made of two colossal, flawless pieces of jade. They are intensely deep, an almost opaque emerald green, but they are unnervingly reflective. As you approach slowly, your reflection appears clearly in the polished stone, only to be instantly distorted, stretched, and thinned by the convex surface of the jade. This is the strange, mysterious detail as you move, circling the pedestal. The jade eyes seem to actively, deliberately follow your movements. They don't simply reflect, they track. The effect is so powerful, so unsettlingly conscious, that you instinctively take a step backward, your heart giving a hard, anxious thud against your ribs. It is not the geometry of the mask playing tricks on your eye. It feels like the mask is breathing life into a forgotten entity, an intelligence that has been waiting in the dark for 1,000 years. You are being inspected, you are being judged. A brief moment of dark levity flashes through your mind, a necessary mental shield. Well, at least someone in this ruin is finally interested in my itinerary, you whisper, but the gaze of the jade eyes silences you immediately. This mask is tied to a chilling, true horror event from the 16th century, recorded in a single surviving manuscript fragment from a Spanish missionary attempting to chronicle the idolatrous practices of the newly contacted tribes. The fragment details the mask of Shibalanke, a relic of incredible power said to induce visions so vivid and powerful that the wearer often went permanently mad or died of pure terror. The missionary, Padre Esteban, noted that the mask was never worn by the high priest for a ritual. It was placed on the face of the sacrifice just before their death. The final terror, the ultimate act of psychological horror, was to force the victim to gaze at the world and their executioners through the eyes of the very entity demanding their life. You stand there, realizing you are gazing into those very eyes, and the chilling thought settles. What if the entity doesn't need the victim to wear the mask? What if it merely needs the victim to be within its direct, cold line of sight? You remember the copper coins in the mouths of the mummies from Part 5? Were those coins meant to keep the victim's soul tethered to the cult? Or were they placed there to prevent the mouth from forming a final curse or a final despairing cry? The silence of the room, broken only by your own shallow breathing, feels like a trap. The shadows cast by the mask's angular features are impossibly deep, suggesting shapes that do not conform to the light source. You see a momentary flicker in your peripheral vision, a movement just at the edge of the light beam. Your head snaps around. Nothing. Just the rough-hewn stone walls. But when you look back at the mask, the reflection in the jade is still distorted. And for a fleeting, terrifying fraction of a second, you see not your own anxious face, but a faint, smiling visage with reptilian features superimposed over your reflection. You take a final, deep breath, pulling yourself away from the hypnotic power of the jade. The mask, the focus of the cult's terror, is not the end of the path. It is merely a checkpoint, a guardian. You notice a low, narrow passageway behind the pedestal, almost completely hidden by the shadows cast by the terrifying relic. That is your required path. You turn your back on the unblinking gaze of the serpent's eye, feeling the phantom weight of its gaze drilling into the center of your spine, urging you to run, not walk, toward the next unknown darkness. You slip behind the pedestal, turning your back on the unsettling, relentless gaze of the serpent's eye. The passage here is tight and claustrophobic, forcing you to move sideways for a few agonizing steps, the cold stone pressing against your chest and back. You feel a strange resistance, as if the air itself is pushing you away from the heart of the cult. The light of your headlamp struggles to find purchase in this constricted space, reflecting off the damp, uneven stone, creating a disorienting strobe effect. This short, crushing passage opens suddenly into what feels like a library of the forgotten. This is the hidden archive. It is a large, square room, but instead of grand architecture, it is filled with waist-high, stepped stone platforms. Resting meticulously on these platforms are thousands of perfectly preserved clay tablets. The scent of incense here is replaced by the dry, chalky aroma of ancient clay and dust, a smell that speaks of pure, unadulterated knowledge, terrifying in its scope. You move carefully, acutely aware of the fragility of the archive beneath your boots. The tablets are covered in tightly packed, incised glyphs, not the common, recognizable Mayan script, but a variant, sharper and more angular, clearly belonging exclusively to the Serpent King cult. You realize you have discovered the cult's entire written history, their secret theology, and their terrifying promise. Focusing your light on one of the larger, central tablets, you begin to piece together the script. The text is not a historical account, but a manual, detailing the bizarre initiation rites of the cult. The language is poetic and unsettlingly clinical, referring to the human body as a vessel of soft clay that must be hardened and shed. The rites are horrifying in their detail, beginning with weeks of sensory deprivation in chambers filled with the same narcotic incense you smelled in Part 7. This was followed by the forced consumption of sacred psychotropic compounds meant to unravel the fiber of the self. But the true, horrifying core of the initiation is the physical transformation. The ritual required the initiates to spend days lying on cold stone, enduring a series of excruciating, repetitive scarification rituals using obsidian shards, the claws of the king, to cover their skin in geometric patterns, mimicking the scales of a serpent. This painful, agonizing process was done for one purpose, the ultimate chilling promise of the cult, the gift of immortal scales. The text clearly states that by shedding their soft, human skin for a hardened, ritualistic scale, the initiate would be prepared for the final embrace of the Serpent King, granting them a form of cold, reptilian immortality, a preservation of the self that bypassed the slow, soft decay of human death. You remember the mummies in Part 5 perfectly preserved, their mouths open with the copper coins. Was that preservation their immortal scale? You stop and feel the rough scar on your own left wrist, the one that matched the symbol on the map from Part 1. You try to laugh, a dry, anxious sound. Well, that explains the itchiness. I guess I missed the sign-up sheet for this particular body modification club, but the terror is real. Was that scar, that mark you've had since childhood, an ancient sign that you, too, were marked for the scales? This is the true horror event that pervades this entire section. The historical record shows that when the Spanish eventually penetrated a known Serpent King temple in the highlands, they found a room filled not with gold or idols, but with hundreds of coiled, shed human skins, carefully dried, flattened, and preserved. The Spanish missionaries, horrified, believed these were the victims flayed alive. But the archive tablets suggest a far more chilling reality. These were the self-sacrificed vessels, the ritualistically shed skins of the initiates who had completed the scarring ritual and had passed into their scaled state. Ready for their perpetual waiting, you turn your attention to a strange, mysterious detail on a cracked tablet near the back. This tablet is different. Its glyphs are crude, almost childlike. It's a petition, a desperate plea out from an initiate to the high priest, asking for the ritual to be stopped. The plea is not about the pain, but about the change. The initiate writes that the scales were not immortal at all. They were an empty, cold coating, and that every night, the petitioner would hear the faint, desperate crying of the soft, human skin that they had discarded. The cult's promise was a terrifying trick, not immortality, but eternal. Conscious separation from your own humanity. You quickly move away from that tablet, the image of a crying, discarded skin too profound a horror to linger on. The sheer volume of this hidden knowledge is suffocating. You are now saturated with the Serpent King's theology. There is a sense of obligation now, a terrible understanding that you know too much. And this knowledge itself feels like a chilling contract. The slow pace of your exploration is now dictated not by fear of the dark, but by the intellectual terror of consuming this deadly, beautiful, and utterly evil history. You must press on, deeper toward the source of this terrifying, scaly philosophy. You leave the suffocating silence of the hidden archive, the faint chalky dust of the clay tablets clinging to your clothes and boots. The path immediately drops into a low, twisting crawl space, forcing you onto your hands and knees. This is a deliberate, humbling posture, a physical and psychological shift after absorbing the monumental secrets of the cult. The stone here is rough, biting at your palms, and the air is close, pushing your breath back into your lungs. As you crawl forward, the silence of the archive is replaced by a disturbing sense of company. The enclosed space amplifies every little sound, and the only light comes from your headlamp, casting elongated, frantic shadows that dance and writhe on the uneven stone surfaces. You hear the inevitable, the distinct, rhythmic scraping sound of something moving close behind you, completely synchronized with your own movements. When you pause, the scraping pauses. When you move, it follows. This is the unsettling sensation of the creepy joke, the echo of your own footsteps that sounds like something else is walking with you. You stop again, pressing your ear against the cold stone, listening intently. It's too regular to be an animal, too close to be a simple acoustic trick of the tunnel. It feels like an entity, mimicking your pace, not with hostility, but with a horrifying, patient companionship. It's a playful distraction amidst the dread, a subtle, cold-blooded game played by the ancient horror that governs this space. You offer a shaky, internal piece of dark levity, a way to keep the fear from paralyzing you. If you hear the scuttling sound behind me now, don't blame me. I already warned you about the creepy companion. Maybe it's just looking for a map. Or perhaps it's just the Serpent King's lost pet iguana trying to catch up. You press on, knowing the sound will not stop, but refusing to look back into the absolute blackness. As you emerge from the crawl space, standing once more in a slightly larger corridor, you are immediately confronted by the true horror event that marks this section. The walls are no longer bare stone or covered in murals. They are lined with small, square niches, each just large enough to hold a single skull. And within these niches, perfectly preserved, are hundreds of human skulls, stacked neatly in rows, extending as far as your light can penetrate. This isn't a burial site, it's a terrifying inventory. And the most disturbing detail, every single skull, ancient and yellowed, has a small, circular hole meticulously bored into its forehead, exactly at the point of the third eye. This surgical precision suggests a ritualistic extraction or draining of the brain, perhaps to retrieve the unraveled self mentioned in the initiation texts from Part 9. This silent, terrifying gallery is a testament to the cult's absolute control over not only the body but the very essence of human consciousness. You notice a strange, mysterious detail among the thousands of identical bored skulls. In one niche, the skull is placed backward, facing the wall, and the circular hole is not in the forehead, but at the base of the spine, where the neck meets the skull. This skull is placed next to an inscription that, when crudely translated, reads, "The one who looked back." You feel a violent urge to spin around and look back at the crawl space you just exited, where the scraping sound is still faintly, persistently following you. But the fate of the backward-facing skull, the unjustly punished one, holds your feet to the floor. This detail feeds directly into an ancient, incomprehensible academic debate surrounding the purpose of skull cults in Mesoamerica. While most scholars acknowledge the ritual display of skulls, no one can agree on the specific purpose of the bored hole. Was it a method of preserving the skull? A symbolic release of the spirit? Or a means to harvest a sacred liquid from the brain? The "one who looked back" skull, with the hole in the spine, suggests a specific, devastating punishment for curiosity, for breaking the relentless forward momentum demanded by the Serpent King's path. You move slowly, meticulously, past the silent, staring sockets of the skull gallery, feeling the cold, clinical judgment of the centuries dead on your every movement. You find yourself walking faster, trying to outpace the phantom footsteps of your unseen companion, only to realize the faster you move, the faster it moves, always perfectly synchronized, always just out of sight. You are trapped in a rhythm of terrifying pursuit and slow, mandated progress, urged forward by the relentless presence of the cult. The path is demanding your commitment, and the cost of looking back is terrifyingly clear. The corridor of skulls finally gives way to a profound change in the environment. You step out of the dry, cold silence of the archive and into a large, cavernous space where the air is immediately damp, heavy, and resonating with the sound of rushing water. This is the water chamber, and the atmosphere here is startling. A sudden, deep drop in temperature that feels less like refrigeration and more like being submerged. The floor is slick with moisture, and your light reveals massive, rough-hewn pillars supporting the high ceiling, all wet and glistening. In the center of this enormous space, your light falls upon an underground lake, a cenote. The water is impossibly dark, an obsidian blackness that seems to absorb all light, making its depth utterly unknowable. It is perfectly still, save for a slow, almost imperceptible undulation on the surface, as if something vast is stirring far below. The sound of the water, a constant, low, echoing slosh against the distant stone edges, is both hypnotic and deeply unnerving. You approach the edge cautiously, the smooth, worn stone beneath your feet, wet and treacherous. You kneel and shine your light across the water's surface. It is so polished, so dark, that it acts as a perfect mirror, reflecting the cavern's rough ceiling and your own anxious, sweat-streaked face. This is the strange, mysterious detail that makes your blood run cold. As you lean closer, you see the reflection, and for a terrifying second, it is not just you, superimposed over your own image in the black water. The reflection shows a shadowy figure impossibly tall, standing directly behind you, its features indistinct, but its posture one of terrifying, patient observation. You whirl around instantly, your heart seizing in your chest. Nothing, just the massive wet pillars and the echoing silence. When you look back at the water, your own reflection is once again singular, but the fear remains. The water reflects an image that isn't you, a momentary glimpse into the Serpent King's constant company. The sight of the cenote immediately brings to mind a true, terrifying story of a drowning sacrifice linked to the Serpent King cult. The traditional Mayan belief held cenotes as sacred portals to the underworld, the Serpent King cult, however, perverted this belief. Their most brutal ritual, the gift of the well, involved throwing initiates or victims into these dark pools, not as an offering to the gods of rain, but as a deliberate attempt to drown their shadow, the human essence that held memory and fear. A colonial account details the capture of a young man in the 17th century who had escaped such a sacrifice. He was mute and terrified, but his back and limbs were covered in deep, parallel claw marks, consistent with an aquatic animal. He only communicated one thing before dying: the water was not cold, it was hot, and the reflection in the surface was not his own, but the serpent's. You pull back from the edge, fighting the dizzying sense of vertigo. This water is not life-giving. It is a profound, suffocating darkness that waits to consume not your body, but your very reflection, your identity. A necessary, dark piece of humor surfaces to combat the mounting dread. If I drop my headlamp in here, I'm blaming the water, you whisper. The joke immediately absorbed by the huge, echoing space. This is officially the most expensive mirror I've ever looked into. This chamber forces you to confront an ancient, incomprehensible academic debate. Are these submerged tunnels the result of natural erosion? Or are they man-made? The ceiling here is too high, the pillars too regularly spaced to be a random cave. Some fringe theorists argue that the Serpent King cult, possessing an advanced knowledge of subterranean hydrology, engineered these water chambers to specifically host an immense, captive creature, the Serpent King itself, the cenote serving as its eternal, hidden eye. The unsettling stillness of the water surface and the sense of immense volume beneath only serve to reinforce this horrifying idea. You notice a narrow, hand-cut ledge running along the circumference of the cenote. The only way forward. It's slippery, dangerously close to the abyss, and seems to require absolute, unwavering focus. You retrieve the map once more. The serpentine line now spirals around a central void. You are at the edge of the true center of the lair. The water below you is the final, black barrier. You begin your slow, careful progress along the ledge. The reflection of the water chamber clinging to your boots, hoping that the shadowy image you glimpsed does not follow you from the deep, dark pool. You inch along the narrow, wet ledge of the cenote. The black water, a terrifying, silent presence just inches from your foot. Every muscle is tensed, focused entirely on the precarious footing and the terrifying reflection you glimpsed in the black pool. The scent of ozone and wet stone is strong here, but you push past the primal fear. Driven by the relentless cold curiosity this entire journey has instilled. The ledge eventually terminates at another archway, smaller than the first, leading away from the water and into a short, circular chamber. The air here is instantly dry again, cold, and strangely light. Your headlamp reveals the room is almost entirely empty, save for one object, a massive, perfectly circular stone. It sits flat on the floor, about 5 feet in diameter, its surface worn smooth by time or ritual. This is the object of the next academic mystery. The stone is unremarkable in every aspect except for one crucial, strange, mysterious detail. It has a perfectly cylindrical, man-made hole in its exact center, about 8 inches wide, penetrating the entire thickness of the stone. and disappearing into the darkness below. This single feature has puzzled archaeologists for decades when similar stones were found in other, smaller ruins. Most mainstream scholars debate its function between astronomical or sacrificial, or the astronomical argument suggests the hole was used as a sighting device, aligning with a specific star or planet, perhaps Venus, the Mayan star of war, on key ritual dates. Its perfection used to focus divine energy. The sacrificial argument is far more chilling. Fringe historians theorize that this hole was used in a specific type of binding sacrifice, where the victim was secured to the stone with a single rope or chain around the waist, preventing them from moving beyond the stone's circumference during a long, slow ritual. The hole would be the final resting place for the victim's discarded heart or head, pushed through to be offered to the underworld directly. The debate is fueled by the fact that no known Mayan iconography definitively explains the hole. It is an incomprehensible detail, a mystery that has consumed academic careers. As you circle the stone, you notice a true horror event that leans heavily toward the sacrificial interpretation. Running from the central hole to the outer edge, there is a barely perceptible groove, a shallow, dried channel, almost invisible under the thin layer of dust. You lean closer, shining your light. It's a drainage channel, perfectly engineered to allow liquid to flow from the center to the edge. And despite the centuries, you can detect the faintest, dried, metallic scent of old blood clinging to the groove. It's an unspoken testament to the stone's grim purpose, confirming the academic suspicion that this was a place of suffering and precise, cold ritual. You try to lighten the oppressive mood with a strained, dark joke, running your hand nervously over the smooth, cold stone. Well, I'm glad they had good drainage planning. At least. No one likes a soggy ritual platform. The sound of your voice is brittle in the small, dry chamber. You realize that this massive, immovable stone is a deliberate centerpiece, an anchor point. It's a point of concentration, a place where the physical and the metaphysical worlds intersect, facilitated by that perfect dark hole. You instinctively keep your distance, acutely aware that your own presence completes the pattern, putting you on the circumference of a mechanism that has been awaiting an offering for centuries. The map shows the Serpent King's path continuing straight from this point, directly away from the hole. You take a final, quick look at the central void, the blackness below promising an eternity of fall, and you move swiftly toward the exit. The air in the next passage is completely still, but as you pass through, you feel a faint, upward draft of air from the central hole in the stone, a cold, empty breath rising from the earth below. You move quickly from the cold, silent chamber of the sacrificial stone, driven forward by the profound, unsettling feeling of the ancient dried blood scent. The corridor you enter is different again. It is high and arched, clearly a major artery of the structure, but the walls are covered in thick, woven tapestries of moss and fungal growth, dampening all sound. The silence is suddenly immense, suffocating. Yet this time it feels less like an absence of sound and more like a vast, held breath. And then you hear it. It is faint at first, a vibration more than a sound, felt deep in the bone of your feet, pressed against the cold stone floor. A low, rhythmic thudding. It is the beginning of the drumbeat. A steady, deep, rhythmic sound begins to resonate through the stone. It is slow, precise, and utterly relentless. The sound of a ritual long ago silenced, now beginning its chilling revival. Thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. It's an ancient, profound heartbeat, echoing from the core of the earth, setting the pace for your final descent. This drumbeat is the focal point of a true horror event, often whispered among the few locals who dare to speak of the Snake City. They tell of the Danza del Corazon dance of the heart, a ceremony where cultists would drum continuously for days, pushing themselves and their victims to the brink of delirium. A true historical fragment exists, detailing how Spanish soldiers, attempting to subdue a remote Mayan enclave, reported hearing the drumming for 3 full days. When they finally broke through the defenses, they found all the inhabitants warriors, women, and children dead from exhaustion and self-inflicted wounds, their ears bleeding, but their bodies still twitching to the invisible, silent beat that had driven them beyond life. You listen to the current rhythm. It is slow, meditative, almost hypnotic. It has a strange, mysterious detail that catches your attention. The sound itself seems to shift its source. It is never directly ahead. Sometimes it comes from the floor, sometimes from the ceiling, sometimes from the walls, simultaneously. It is an aural illusion, engineered by the cult's stonework, designed to surround and disorient, making you feel trapped within the sound itself. An inescapable, rhythmic noose tightening around your mind. The drumbeat is the source of another creepy joke that runs through your mind, a desperate attempt to find levity in the rhythm. Well, at least the Serpent King has good taste in BPMs. It's terrible for running, but great for slowly losing your grip on reality. The joke is immediately swallowed by the oppressive thump, thump. You find your pace involuntarily syncing with the beat. You try to slow down, to speed up, but the rhythm is magnetic, pulling your footfall into its own tempo. You feel the slow, insistent force of the cult's will, manifested as this deep, subterranean pulse. As you follow the corridor, the drumbeat grows slightly louder, leading you toward a significant junction. You know that whatever lies next is intrinsically linked to the rhythm. The atmosphere is heavy with anticipation, the air thrumming with the low frequency of the beat, turning the cold air into a tangible, vibrating weight on your chest. You are no longer navigating the ruins. You are moving to the beat of the Serpent King's cold, ancient heart. The final descent is choreographed, and you are the unwilling dancer. The relentless, deep drumbeat from Part 13 pulls you forward. Its hypnotic thump, thump, overriding your own frantic pulse. You are now moving through a narrow, almost suffocating passage, the air vibrating with the low-frequency sound. The stone walls here are deeply grooved, as if scraped by centuries of rough passage, and they guide you relentlessly to the next, horrifying junction. The passage opens abruptly into a series of small, interconnected alcoves carved into the main wall of a much larger, darker corridor. These alcoves are not decorative, they are chillingly functional. You have discovered the silent, eternal resting place of the cult's failures, the chambers of the unjust spirits. Each alcove is, in fact, a small, square cage carved directly into the living rock, just large enough to hold a crouching human body. There are no bars, only a low, smooth stone lip to prevent escape, and a tiny, fist-sized hole high up near the ceiling of the niche. They are empty now, but the air inside these alcoves feels intensely cold, carrying a residual, deep sense of suffering and confinement. The stone structure chillingly suggests where the unfaithful or unworthy were left to starve, their spirits trapped by the very rock that encased them. The initiation ritual mentioned in Part 9 demanded absolute commitment, and these cages represent the terrifying consequence of doubt or failure. A true horror event is vividly present in this silence, the psychological torment of being left to die inches from the main cult corridor. Hearing the constant, rhythmic drumming of the faithful, knowing salvation was only a matter of belief, yet unable to leave your cold, stone prison. You lean close to one of the niches, peering in with your headlamp. You notice a strange, mysterious detail that makes your stomach turn. On the floor of every single cage, there are faint, crescent-shaped scratch marks in the hard stone, concentrated around the low lip. They are not random, they are organized, suggesting a final, desperate, rhythmic attempt by the trapped victim to claw their way out, perhaps even synchronized with the drumbeat they could hear just outside. But the most unsettling thing is that the deepest, most recent-looking marks are on the outside of the lip, facing in, suggesting a prisoner was trying to claw their way back into the confinement, perhaps after a failed escape, driven mad by the jungle or the cult's lingering influence. You try a quick, nervous piece of dark humor to steady yourself. Well, this certainly puts a new spin on time out. I guess they really enforced the quiet hours down here. The silence that follows the attempt at humor is heavy with the weight of unjust death. These cages bring to mind an incomprehensible academic debate concerning the treatment of prisoners in remote Mayan centers. While general scholarship accepts ritual imprisonment, the purpose of the tiny, high-up hole in these specific alcoves remains a puzzle. One theory suggests it was a feeding hole, allowing a meager ration of water or paste to prolong the suffering. Another, far more sinister theory suggests the hole was designed to align with the victim's forehead, allowing the high priest to whisper the Serpent King's final, horrifying promise or curse directly into the mind of the dying, ensuring their spirit remained tethered to the stone, unable to pass on. As you walk past the silent row of alcoves, you feel a distinct pressure, not just from the stone, but a psychic weight of desperation. The drumbeat remains steady, the sound resonating off the stone, a terrible, monotonous accompaniment to the cold, empty cages. You are forced to confront the chilling reality this journey demands absolute faith in the cult's path, or you, too, will be left to listen to the drumbeat in cold, silent despair. The path forward is immediately to your right, twisting sharply, leading you deeper into the heart of the drumming. The rhythmic, deep drumming continues, its steady thump-thump guiding you away from the oppressive, silent fear of the starvation cages. You follow the twisting corridor, and the air immediately becomes heavy with a new sensation, cold, not the ambient chill of an underground space, but a sudden, localized, deep cold that cuts through the humidity and settles directly in your bones. You arrive in a circular antechamber, the source of the profound cold. In the center of a small, raised stone plinth sits a solitary object, bathed in the beam of your headlamp. It is a small, cold, serpent-shaped bracelet, made of highly polished, dark jade, intricately carved to resemble a tightly coiled snake ready to strike. This is the cursed relic. As you approach, the intensity of the cold increases, and you notice a thin, almost invisible mist hovering just inches above the stone plinth. The bracelet is beautiful, menacing, and utterly compelling. You know you should not touch it, but the chilling thorn of curiosity is too strong, too demanding. You reach out a trembling hand and lightly touch the smooth, cold jade. The moment your skin makes contact, a sudden, deep cold washes over you. An icy wave that doesn't just chill your hand, but seems to travel directly up your arm and slam into your chest, stealing your breath. It is a profound, non-physical coldness, the chilling touch of death and absolute stillness. This is the strange, mysterious detail that terrifies you. The moment you touch the jade, you see a violent, momentary flash in your mind's eye, not a memory, but a sudden, intense vision of ancient ceremonies. You see figures cloaked in dark, feathered robes, their faces hidden, moving in slow, rhythmic patterns. You hear a sound other than the drumbeat, a high-pitched, metallic shriek that sounds like something being dragged across rough stone. The vision is gone in a flash, leaving you gasping, your hand instinctively recoiling from the cold jade. The contact was brief, but the terrifying memory of the ceremony is now imprinted on your mind. The bracelet is tied to a brutal, true horror event, often dismissed as colonial folklore. The legend of La Escama del Despertar, the scale of awakening. It was said that the Serpent King's priests would place this jade bracelet on the wrist of an initiate who had achieved the immortal scales Part 9, believing the coldness of the jade would halt the process of human decay, cementing their transformation. However, a surviving journal entry from a captured cult servant details the truth. The bracelet did not halt decay. It merely preserved consciousness as the body began to fail. The initiate was eternally trapped, aware and freezing, their minds screaming inside a slowly desiccating shell, a profound punishment for achieving the immortal state. A much-needed moment of dark levity cuts through the dread. Though your voice is shaky, note to self, next time, Chots, try the gift shop first. I think this relic might be the one giving me frostbite. You rub your arm vigorously, trying to dispel the deep, non-physical coldness. Remember the backward-facing skull in the archive? The one with the hole in the spine? For the final curse. You feel a sudden, violent empathy for that injustice. The coldness radiating from this bracelet, this powerful relic, confirms that the Serpent King cult's gifts were always a devastating trap. An exchange of life for a terrifying, conscious stasis. You feel an intense pressure to leave this chamber. But the bracelet's cold is still radiating, demanding attention. You note the small, sharp teeth of the carved serpent, biting its own tail, the twisted Ouroboros symbol that has guided you since the map. You realize this relic is not merely an object, it is a spiritual battery, absorbing the consciousness of every initiate who wore it. You turn your back on the chilling relic, knowing that the experience of its profound cold will be with you for a very long time, a chilling thorn of ancient suffering now embedded in your own memory. You move swiftly away from the chilling antechamber and the profound, residual coldness of the serpent bracelet. The deep, resonant drumbeat continues, now slightly louder and more insistent, pulling you into the next, and perhaps most terrifying, section of the lair. The corridor here is wider and much older, the stones seemingly fused together, the humidity returning to cling to your skin like a damp second layer. As you walk, You notice the smoothness of the walls is uncanny, unnaturally seamless. It feels wrong. Too deliberate for natural cavern formation or even rough-hewn Mayan construction. You run your hand along the stone, and the surface is strangely porous, almost spongy beneath your fingers. This subtle detail is the beginning of the profound, gut-wrenching realization that constitutes the true horror event of this part. The tunnel walls are not carved stone, but petrified human bones covered in a thin layer of plaster. You stop, your heart hammering against your ribs, and scrape gently at the damp, smooth surface with a fingernail. The plaster flakes away easily, revealing a ghastly, silent construction material. You trace the shape with your fingertips, the unmistakable curvature of a pelvic bone, the hollow cylinder of a femur, the clustered smaller fragments of vertebrae, all set meticulously into a grisly subterranean mortar, creating the perfect smooth surface that has contained you for miles. This entire section is a catacomb turned inside out, a structural homage to the cult's absolute dominion over the human form. The silent, suffocating tunnels are not tunnels at all. They are the compressed, cemented remains of countless victims and initiates. This chilling knowledge is the final, undeniable proof of the Serpent King cult's immense, terrifying scale. Every time you touched a wall, every time you braced yourself in the crawl spaces, you were leaning on the silent, preserved remains of the dead. It is a profound, slow-burn horror that settles deep in your core as you shine your light up and down the corridor, now viewing the walls with pure, stomach-churning dread. You see a strange, mysterious detail that adds a layer of inexplicable horror. In several places, where the plaster has cracked or fallen away completely, exposing the bone matrix underneath. You see faint, shimmering patches. Closer inspection reveals that these patches are fragments of jade dust, meticulously mixed into the plaster. Why was the jade, the sacred stone of life, used to ritually seal the dead into their structural imprisonment? Or was it to give the walls a false sense of cold, silent life? A final, chilling mockery of the victims whose very bodies now bear the weight of the temple. The profound terror demands a moment of dark, frantic levity, a desperate attempt to regain control. Well, I certainly hope the Architectural Review Board signed off on this. I bet they had a difficult time finding the load-bearing femur. The joke is dry and brittle, swallowed immediately by the stone and bone walls. This realization is tied to an important yet disturbing, incomprehensible academic debate concerning the historical accounts of bone temples in Mesoamerica. While initial Spanish reports were often dismissed as exaggerations, this construction method lends chilling credence to the idea that certain cults elevated human sacrifice and cannibalism to an industrial, architectural scale, turning the body into the ultimate, everlasting building block. The precise, meticulous nature of the bone placement here, the way the curved sections are used for arch support, the straight ones for reinforcement, suggests a terrifying, highly sophisticated, and utterly inhuman engineering practice. You feel a violent physical urge to escape the terrifying intimacy of the bone walls, to run from the suffocating presence of so many contained dead. The rhythmic drumbeat, which once seemed hypnotic, now feels like the steady, relentless pounding of a massive, ancient hammer, driving the next bone into place, cementing your presence within the structure. You press forward, your steps slow and heavy, no longer walking on stone, but on the accumulated, pulverized history of the Serpent King's victims. The path must end soon. The bone-lined corridor, with its macabre masonry, finally terminates in a wide, ascending staircase. The stairs are carved from solid, dark granite, a stark and welcome contrast to the horrifying porous plaster and bone walls you just traversed. The drumbeat, which has been your cold, steady companion, now intensifies dramatically, its volume rising until it is a constant physical pressure against your eardrums and chest. Thump, thump, thump. It is no longer a rhythm. It is a declaration. You climb the stairs, each step heavy with the weight of the cult's history. The air here is clean and strangely warm, dry from some subterranean heat source, and the scent of incense, mixed with something sharp and metallic, returns strongly. You reach the top of the staircase and step into the most immense space you have yet encountered. This is the grand altar. The chamber is vast, dome-shaped, and shockingly tall, carved to mimic the gaping mouth of a colossal serpent. Your headlamp is insufficient. The chamber is illuminated by several distant, flickering torches placed high up in niches, casting long, writhing shadows that look exactly like giant coiled snakes. Coiled, the room is dominated by a central, terrifying structure, a massive, serpent-shaped stone altar. It is carved from a single piece of black, polished basalt, shaped into a gigantic coiled snake, its head raised, its fangs bared, ready to strike. The altar is easily 20 feet long, its surface smooth and cold, awaiting the final, terrifying rite. This altar is the ultimate physical manifestation of the Serpent King, and you feel a profound sense of completion in your journey. This moment brings the immediate terror of a true horror event. The altar is slick and gleaming, not from water, but from a dark, viscous substance. As your light sweeps across the altar's surface, you see dried, patterned residue, the unmistakable imprint of a freshly flayed human skin, stretched and dried on the altar in a ritual of total submission. This is the ritual of the immortal scales, Part 9, in its final, terrifying stage. The body, the human vessel, is offered entirely to the Serpent King. The sight is dizzying, a flash of profound violence in the cold, silent stone room. You notice a strange, mysterious detail that draws your eye to the base of the massive altar. Surrounding the coiled tail of the serpent are hundreds of small, perfectly symmetrical piles of black sand. They are too uniform to be natural, and as you look closely, you realize the sand is actually pulverized obsidian, the same material as the altar from Part 4. The piles are arranged in a massive, spiral pattern, mimicking the uncoiling of the serpent itself. This suggests that the altar is not just a carving, but a machine, a focus point for immense, dark energy. The obsidian piles, acting as a conduit or a final, granular offering. The deep, continuous drumming is loudest here, deafening, vibrating in the very stone, urging you forward toward the altar. You realize that you are the central subject now. You instinctively whisper a quick, dark piece of humor. more to hear your own voice than for relief. Well, this is an impressive setup, but I definitely prefer the gift wrapping on the smaller gifts. The irony of your position standing on the precipice of a final, terrifying ritual is sharp and cold. The most unnerving thing is the smell. The scent of incense and hot stone is here, but beneath it is a faint, musky, reptilian odor. Something cold and primal that suggests a massive, living creature is not far away. The torchlight flickers, and you feel, rather than see, the presence of the Serpent King itself, coiled around this final, grand altar. The slow, relentless beat of the drum is counting down the moments until the final, terrifying rite is complete. The deafening drumbeat pulses in the grand altar chamber. Its relentless rhythm, the final sound in the Serpent King's lair. You stand before the colossal, black basalt altar. The terrifying scent of dried violence and musk heavy in the air. The spiraling obsidian sand at the base of the coiled serpent altar confirms this is the nexus, the point of no return. As your eyes frantically scan the huge chamber, searching for a path, any path that doesn't involve the grim, slick surface of the altar, you spot it, high on the far wall, shrouded by the flickering torchlight. There is an opening. It is a low, unassuming, rough-hewn passage, completely devoid of the terrifying artistry that defines the rest of the structure. It is a humble escape route, almost concealed by a falling curtain of damp moss and vines, a sign of the outside world, a breath of the living jungle. But between you and this single chance at survival lies the immense, coiled bulk of the Serpent King altar. There is no way around it. You must cross its surface to reach the exit. This is the final choice. The prospect of placing your feet on the slick, cold basalt, where the flesh of countless victims has been offered, sends a profound wave of nausea through you. This is the true horror event of the moment, the realization that the final act of your journey is a ritualistic one. To walk upon the Serpent King. Is this the cult's ultimate test? To see if the unworthy will defile the sacred space, or if the worthy will embrace it as a final, terrifying platform? This choice brings you to an incomprehensible moment of choice between life and the cult's embrace. You are facing an extreme, profound paradox. To reach the escape route and choose life, you must step on the very manifestation of the Serpent King, an act that could lead to instantaneous, violent retribution. To show reverence and avoid the altar is to choose eternal entrapment in the chamber. The drumbeat pounds faster now, a frenzied accompaniment to your paralyzing indecision. You recall the academic debate about the sacrificial stone from Part 12, the drainage groove for blood. Was the goal of the cult to absorb the body, or to merely claim the final, terrifying moment of choice? A subtle, strange, mysterious detail catches your eye at the base of the altar near your feet, etched into the granite floor. Beneath the shadow of the serpent's head is a single, isolated glyph, a tiny, stylized image of an open human palm turned upward. It's an ancient symbol of surrender, of offering the self without resistance. It suggests that crossing the altar requires not just physical movement, but a mental act of submission. If you cross it in defiance, you risk a violent end. If you cross it in submission, you may escape. But you also implicitly complete the final ritual. You try to find a moment of dark humor to a desperate laugh. This is worse than getting onto a rush hour subway train. At least on the subway. The floor isn't covered in, well, you know, the sound of the drums is so loud you barely hear your own strained voice. You know you cannot stay. The temperature in the chamber is rising from some unseen subterranean heat, and the scent of musk and incense is becoming unbearable, suffocating. You have to take the step. You move slowly, cautiously, choosing a spot that seems less visibly slick, and place one boot gingerly onto the cold, polished basalt of the coiled serpent altar. The moment your weight settles, the drumming cuts out. Absolute silence crashes down. A void of sound that is more terrifying than the noise. You feel the profound cold of the basalt radiating through your boot sole, and you freeze, anticipating the sudden strike. The unseen mechanism of the Serpent King's wrath. You are standing on the very heart of the terror, committed to an act of necessary defilement or a final terrible act of worship. Terrible. The sudden, absolute silence in the grand altar chamber is a physical shock, more jarring than the loudest drumming. You stand frozen, one foot on the coiled basalt serpent, your heart waiting for the catastrophic strike. But nothing happens. The silence is profound, cold, and heavy with expectation. You slowly shift your weight, taking another tentative step onto the terrifying altar surface, moving inch by agonizing inch toward the moss-shrouded escape hatch on the far wall. As you step, your headlamp beam catches a flash of color near the base of the altar. On the side facing the exit, a final, chilling detail you missed in the panic of the drums. This is the creepy revelation. You see a small, tattered piece of organic material sticking out from beneath a crack in the basalt slab. You kneel quickly, pulling the material free. With shaking fingers, it is a scroll made not of parchment or clay, but of dried, stretched human skin. It's old, brittle, and stained with the same reddish-brown pigment from your original map. With a profound sense of sickening dread, you realize that the map you have been clutching, the brittle parchment that guided you through every terror of this lair, is not an external document. It is a piece of the cult itself. You quickly unroll the original map and compare it to the newly discovered skin scroll fragment. They are identical in texture, smell, and pigmentation. The original map is, in fact, an excised piece of the cult's sacred archive, a skin scroll. This realization is the true horror event that collapses your entire journey into a single, terrifying truth. The map's impossible specificity, its accurate guidance through an undocumented lair. The way it called to you in the antique shop, it was not a relic you found. It was a contract you received. You frantically trace the lines on the map one last time, your thumb running over the stylized serpent head at the center. The lines, the winding tunnels, the circular chambers, they were not just a route to the ruins. The entire layout, when viewed as a whole, is a vast, terrifying, artistic rendering of a coiled serpent. And the route traced on the skin scroll is the stylized path of its venom, leading inexorably to the final point, the spot where you are standing now. The map was a prophecy and an invitation, and it was always leading directly to you. You recall the rough scar on your left wrist from part 1, the one that matched the map's symbol? You now understand the map wasn't just directing you to the Serpent King, it was directing the Serpent King's final promised ritual to its final chosen recipient. A final, desperate piece of dark levity. A gasp against the void. This is what I get for buying things unclassified. I really should have checked the return policy on the human skin products. You are seized by a horrifying, final understanding. The silence is not a sign of the king's absence. It is the silence of an entity that has simply completed its preparations. You scramble off the altar, the terrifying implications driving you toward the rough-hewn exit. The moss and jungle vines hanging over the opening are not a welcome sign. They are a curtain drawn over the end of the cult's play, and you are the star sacrifice. You push against the realization, the cold, terrifying truth of the skin scroll map driving you forward. You scramble toward the rough, low-hanging opening. The promised exit draped with moss and vines. The air here, near the opening, is suddenly thick with the humid, vibrant scent of the living jungle, a jarring contrast to the cold, dead air of the altar chamber. You are so close to freedom. Yet the knowledge of the cult's final perfect trap weighs more heavily than any stone. As you throw your shoulder against the hanging vines, trying to force your way back into the world, you hear a sound. It is not the drumbeat, which remains in its terrifying silence, nor the footsteps, which ceased when you stepped onto the altar. This sound is different, a low, scraping, shuddering groan that emanates not from a specific spot, but from the very structure surrounding you. The entire structure is collapsing. The stone around the entrance is cracking violently. Chunks of the bone plaster walls from Part 16 are beginning to rain down, exposing the horrifying white matrix of compressed human remains. The massive basalt altar begins to shift, grinding against the floor with a sound that splits the silence like a knife. This is the escapeless embrace, the frantic final moment of pure survival, or slow, terrifying surrender. You have 2 fractions of a second to make your move. If you choose escape, you must dive headlong through the opening, fighting against the thick, root-clotted vines. You feel the crushing weight of the subterranean structure, the massive tonnage of rock and bone falling toward you. You remember the terror of the crawl space, Part 10, the difficulty of movement. This escape is violent, loud, and desperate. You claw at the earth and roots, pulling yourself frantically into the chaotic, green embrace of the jungle, leaving the crushing, final moments of the Serpent King's lair behind you. You hear the final, echoing crack as the grand altar chamber seals itself shut forever, taking the Serpent King, the silence, and the skin scroll map with it. The jungle is healing. You lie here, beneath the dizzying canopy, and the slow, persistent hum of insects and the soft, intermittent sounds of the night birds begin to replace the chaos in your mind. The drumming has stopped. The chilling scrape of bone against bone is gone, and the air smells only of rain-wet leaves and rich, living earth. The terror is receding, a tide pulling back from a distant shore, leaving behind only the cold, polished stones of memory. The silence that settles around you now is not the predatory, empty silence of the Serpent King's lair, but the deep, natural quiet of the world at rest. The fear is transforming, changing from frantic adrenaline into a heavy, reflective ache that sits deep in your chest. You think of the map, the skin scroll. It is lost now, buried deep beneath the earth. but the memory of the route remains, etched perfectly into your mind. You remember the copper coins, the backward-facing skull, the terrible perfection of the bone walls. You did not just return from a journey, you returned with a terrible, silent knowledge that you must now carry. As you slowly, carefully rise to your feet, you feel the rough scar on your left wrist, the one that matched the symbol on the map. You look down, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine you see a faint, metallic glint on your palm, a speck of the pulverized obsidian from the grand altar. But the night is too dark, and your mind is too tired. It is a trick of the exhausted eye, you tell yourself. The jungle calls to you now, not with the seductive whistle of the forest watchers, but with the gentle, rhythmic sounds of life. You have paid the price of passage. The cold knowledge is yours, but the living world is reclaiming you. The path back is long and slow, and the world above is waiting, unaware of the terror you've left buried beneath its roots. Now, let the darkness outside guide you, and let your body find the deep, deserved sleep that the Serpent King's victims never knew. Drift now, slowly and safely, away from the cold.